The world outside Alara's window was painted in shades of deep blue and soft black. The moon, a silent silver coin, hung in the sky, but for Alara, it might as well have been the bright, angry sun. Sleep was a distant country she couldn't seem to find a map to. Her mind was a busy beehive. Thoughts buzzed and hummed without rest. Did I remember to send that email? What will I do about tomorrow's meeting? I should really clean the cupboard on the weekend. On and on they went, a tangled knot of worries and to-do lists that tightened behind her eyes. The soft pillow felt like a rock, and the cozy blanket seemed to trap her restless energy instead of warmth. Frustrated, she finally pushed the covers back. "This is useless," she whispered to the quiet room. If sleep wouldn't come to her, she would go for a walk to meet it halfway. She pulled on a comfortable sweater and her softest shoes, not bothering to turn on any bright lights, and slipped out into the cool night air. The path behind her house led into an old wood everyone called the Whispering Pines. At night, it was a different world. The sharp, clean scent of pine needles filled the air. The only sounds were the gentle rustle of leaves in the faint breeze and the distant, lonely call of an owl. The moonlight didn't so much light the path as it dripped through the thick canopy, creating puddles of silver on the ground. It was peaceful, yes, but Alara's mind was still chattering, now commenting on the shadows and the strange shapes of the branches. She walked without a real destination, just letting her feet carry her deeper into the quiet. After a while, she noticed the trees began to change. The tall, straight pines gave way to ancient oaks and willows, their trunks thick and twisted with age. The air grew warmer, losing its nighttime chill, and carried a new smell, a mix of wet earth, blooming night flowers, and something else. Something like the smell of the air right after a lightning strike, but softer, more magical. Curiosity, a feeling stronger than her tiredness, pulled her forward. She pushed aside a curtain of hanging ivy and found herself stepping into a place that took her breath away. It was a perfect, circular glade. The grass under her feet was incredibly soft and short, like a velvet carpet. In the very center was a pond, so still and so dark it looked like a giant, polished piece of black glass, perfectly reflecting the moon and stars above. But the real magic came from the plants. Tiny mushrooms dotted the ground, pulsing with a soft greenish light. Flowers with petals that looked like spun silver glowed with a gentle blue radiance. The entire glade was bathed in this dreamy, ethereal light, humming with a low, peaceful energy. It felt alive, and that's when she saw him. On the very center of the pond, sitting on a lily pad that was itself glowing with a soft golden light, was a toad. He was larger than any toad she had ever seen, about the size of her cupped hands. His skin was not slimy, but looked like it was made of the finest, darkest velvet, dotted with patterns that resembled tiny constellations. But it was his eyes that held her. They were a deep, warm amber, and they shone with an intelligence that was ancient and kind. Alara froze, expecting him to plop into the water with a startled splash. But he didn't move. He simply sat there, regal and calm, and slowly, very slowly, blinked his golden eyes. Then he spoke. His voice was not a croak. It was a low, gravelly rumble, like smooth stones being tumbled gently in a shallow stream. It was a voice that held the wisdom of countless rainy seasons and quiet nights. "The night is for rest, little one," the toad said, his gaze steady on her. "But your thoughts, they are like startled sparrows flitting from branch to branch. They disturb the quiet of this place." Alara's mouth fell open. She was standing in a glowing clearing talking to a toad. A part of her mind, the busy, logical part, screamed that this was impossible, that she was dreaming. But the feeling of the soft grass beneath her feet, the scent of the magical flowers, and the deep, calm presence of the toad felt more real than her own hectic thoughts had all week. She found her voice, which came out as a whisper. I can't sleep." "My mind won't be quiet." The toad gave a slow, understanding nod. "It is a common trouble in your world," he rumbled. "Too much noise on the inside, fighting the silence on the outside. My name is Bufo. I am a keeper of this glade, a weaver of quieter things." "A sorcerer?" Alara asked, her curiosity overpowering her shock. "In a manner of speaking," Bufo replied. "Long ago I chose this form. A grand castle is noisy. A wizard's tower is drafty. But a lily pad is just right for listening to the dreams of the world and helping them grow properly. This pond is a wellspring of that peace. But lately," he paused, and a faint shadow seemed to pass over his amber eyes. "Lately a sadness has been creeping in. The dreams born here have been troubled. And your restless heart, child, is like a loud knock on a quiet door. Alara hugged herself, feeling a little guilty for bringing her chaos into this peaceful place. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Bufo's expression was gentle. Do not be sorry. Perhaps it is no accident that you found your way here tonight. A heart that understands restlessness is often the very one needed to help heal it. He looked at her, his head tilted, and the glade seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The magical lights pulsed softly. The water of the pond remained perfectly still, and for the first time that night, Ilara's own buzzing thoughts had gone completely, wonderfully silent. She was simply there in the moment, captivated by a sorcerer toad and the beginning of an adventure she never could have imagined. The words hung in the enchanted air. Your thoughts are like startled sparrows. It was the truest thing anyone had ever said to Ilara. That's exactly what it felt like inside her head, a constant, fluttering panic of worries and ideas that never settled. She stood there, barefoot on the impossibly soft grass, just staring at the toad. A million questions fought their way to the front of her mind, but all she could manage was a single shaky word. You can talk? The toad Bufo let out a sound that was a mix between a gentle croak and a soft chuckle. It was a warm, earthy sound. Is it so strange? He rumbled. The trees speak in the rustle of their leaves. The stream speaks with its bubbling song. I simply use words you recognize. Ilara took a hesitant step closer to the water's edge. The pond was so clear and still she could see the glowing roots of the lily pad stretching down into the dark, clean water. She wasn't afraid. How could she be? His presence was as calming as a deep, steady breath. But you're a toad, she said, still trying to wrap her head around it. And you are a human, Bufo replied, his amber eyes twinkling.
Yet here you are in a glade that glows, speaking to me.
The world is full of more magic than most people remember to see. They are too busy looking at their feet to notice the stars. He had a point. Ilara thought about her own life, rushing from home to work, her eyes glued to her phone, barely noticing the change of seasons or the way the morning light hit the kitchen table. She had forgotten how to look. I'm Ilara, she said, finally introducing herself. It felt important, like a formal agreement that this was really happening. A lovely name, Bufo said with a slow, dignified blink. It suits you. Now tell me, Ilara, what brings a sparrow heart to the quietest place in the woods so late at night? So, she told him. It all came tumbling out in a soft rush there in the magical glade. She told him about the endless list of tasks waiting for her the next day. She told him about the silly argument with a friend that kept replaying in her mind. She confessed the low, humming worry about things she couldn't even name, a fear of not being good enough, of time passing too quickly. She spoke of the heavy feeling that settled on her chest the moment she turned off the light, making the dark feel oppressive instead of peaceful. It's like my brain is a room with 100 windows and all of them are open, letting in every thought and noise from the world. She finished, her shoulders slumping. I just want to close the windows. Just for a little while. Bufo listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer quick solutions. He just listened with his whole being. And for the first time, Ilara felt like someone was truly hearing her, not just waiting for their turn to talk. When she was done, he was silent for a long moment. The only sound, the very faint hum of the glowing plants. The world has forgotten how to rest, he said, his gravelly voice full of a gentle sadness. It values the buzz and the hum. It has forgotten the power of the pause, the silence between the notes that makes the music. This glade, this is a place where the world comes to dream its gentlest dreams. The magic here helps to weave them. But lately a gloom has been settling, a sadness from the outside world seeping in. The dreams have become restless, tangled with worry, just like your own. He shifted his weight on the glowing lily pad. I feel it. The willow tree weeps though it makes no sound. The stream's song is muted. A young fox kit trembles in its den, afraid of shadows that never used to trouble it. This sadness dims the light of this place. Ilara looked around, seeing the glade with new eyes. The beautiful, pulsing lights now seemed like they were fighting against a darkness she couldn't see. The peace felt fragile, like a soap bubble. Can you fix it? She asked. I am the keeper of this place, Bufo said. But my magic is the magic of stillness. My roots are deep here in this lily pad, in this pond. It is the anchor point. I cannot leave to find the source of this sadness. My task is to hold the center, to keep the heart of the glade beating. He looked directly at her, his gaze intense and kind. But you can walk. You can listen. You have a heart that is tired of its own noise, which makes it perfect for hearing the quiet pains of others. Ilara's eyes widened. Me? What could I do? I'm not magical. I can't weave dreams. Can't you? Bufo asked. You dream every night, even if you don't remember. And you have already done the first and most important part of magic. What's that? You showed up, he said simply. And you listened to your own need for peace. That is the beginning of all healing. He moved to the very edge of his lily pad, closer to her. I have a purpose for you, Ilara, if you are willing. A small quest. Not with swords or battles, but with a listening ear and a gentle heart. Help me find the sources of this sadness and soothe them. In doing so, I believe you will learn to soothe the sparrows in your own mind. A quest. The word sent a shiver of excitement and nervousness down Ilara's spine. This wasn't in her daily planner. This was real, and it was strange, and it was wonderful. What do I have to do? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Bufo smiled, a subtle stretching of his wide mouth. First, you will need a guide and a reminder. He turned and looked down into the dark water. From a small hidden fold in the skin, near his front leg, a pocket that seemed far too small to hold anything, he brought out what looked like a tiny sleeping beetle. It was dull and dark. He held it carefully in his front feet and breathed upon it, a soft, warm breath that smelled of rain and fresh earth. The little beetle began to glow. A soft, greenish gold light pulsed from its body, slow and steady, like a calm heartbeat. It was a firefly, but unlike any other. Bufo held it out towards Ilara. Hesitantly, she cupped her hands, and he gently placed the glowing insect into her palms. It was warm, and its light felt soothing against her skin. This is a lantern of listening, Bufo explained. It will not show you the path you know, but the path you need. It will glow more warmly. Its light will beat a little faster. When you are near a heart that needs to be heard, it will help you understand what you are hearing. Ilara looked down at the gentle light in her hands. It felt like holding a tiny living star. Your quest is this. Bufo's voice was low and serious. Follow the lantern. Listen to what it leads you to. Hear the stories of the forest. That is all. Just listen. Ilara looked from the gentle light in her hands to the ancient kind eyes of the sorcerer toad. The buzzing in her head was gone, replaced by a single clear thought. Yes, she nodded. I'll try. And in the glowing glade under the watch of the moon and the stars, a simple, tired human and a magical toad made a quiet agreement to mend the broken dreams of the forest, one listened to story at a time. The little firefly lantern pulsed in Ilara's hands, its light a warm, living weight. She looked from its gentle glow back to Bufo, the sorcerer toad, who sat watching her with an expression of deep, quiet faith. A quest, she whispered to herself, the word feeling both strange and wonderful in her mouth. It wasn't a word from her normal life. It wasn't about emails or chores or worrying about what to make for dinner. It felt ancient and important. But where do I start? She asked, looking around the glowing glade. Every direction looked the same, mysterious and dark beyond the circle of magical light. Start by taking a step, Bufo rumbled softly. The lantern will guide you. Trust it. And remember, your only task is to listen. Not to fix, not to solve, just to hear. Often, that is the greatest magic of all. Ilara took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the sweet, night-flower-scented air. She nodded, a new sense of purpose settling over her like a comfortable cloak. She carefully curled her fingers, making a protective cage around the little firefly, and turned away from the pond. As she stepped out of the circle of the glade and back under the thick canopy of the ordinary woods, the air grew cooler. The magical light from the flowers and mushrooms faded behind her, leaving only the silver moonlight and the soft, greenish-gold pulse from her hands. It was like carrying a tiny piece of Bufo's peace with her. For a few minutes, She walked without any clear direction, following a path she half remembered. The firefly's light beat at a steady, slow rhythm, no different from before. Her old doubts began to creep back in. Is this even real? Maybe I'm just sleepwalking. What if this doesn't work? But as that worried thought crossed her mind, the firefly in her hands flickered, its light dimming for just a second as if a cloud had passed over it. Ilara stopped walking. It was reacting to her. She took another deep breath the way she had in the glade, and consciously let the worried thought go, picturing it as a sparrow flying away. Almost immediately, the firefly's glow returned to its warm, steady pulse. "Okay," she whispered to the little light. "I'm listening. I'm trusting." She changed her approach. Instead of trying to decide where to go, she stood perfectly still and closed her eyes. She focused on the feeling of the firefly in her hands, the soft earth beneath her feet, and the sound of the night around her. She stopped trying and started feeling. And then, she felt a very subtle pull. It wasn't a physical force, but a gentle leaning in her heart, like a compass needle slowly swinging towards the north. The firefly's light seemed to grow a fraction warmer against her skin. She opened her eyes and let her feet follow that gentle pull, moving away from the main path and into a thicker part of the woods where the ferns grew tall and damp. The further she walked in this new direction, the warmer the little lantern became. Its light pulsed a little brighter, a little quicker. It was working. After a short while, she came to a part of the forest she had never seen before. The ground sloped down towards a low, damp area, and there, standing alone in a small clearing of its own, was the most enormous and sorrowful willow tree she had ever seen. Its branches did not just sway, they hung down straight and heavy, their long, slender leaves brushing the ground like a curtain of tears. It stood at the edge of a muddy, stagnant patch of earth, where a small trickle of water barely managed to seep through. The air around the tree felt thick with sadness. The firefly in Ilara's hands was now glowing brightly, its light a persistent, warm gold. This was it. This was the first heart that needed to be heard. Ilara walked slowly towards the great tree, feeling small beneath its immense, drooping canopy. What was she supposed to do? Bufo had said to listen. But how do you listen to a tree? Remembering his words, the trees speak in the rustle of their leaves, she decided to do what felt natural. She walked right up to its massive, gnarled trunk, its bark rough and cool under her fingertips. "Hello," she said softly, her voice barely disturbing the quiet. There was no answer, of course, not in words, but she pressed her palm flat against the trunk and closed her eyes, trying to pour all of her attention into the tree, just as Bufo had listened to her. At first there was nothing, just the solid, silent feeling of wood. But then, as she stood there breathing slowly, a feeling began to form in her mind. It wasn't a thought or a picture, but a deep, wordless emotion, a profound loneliness, so heavy it felt like a physical weight. Mixed with the loneliness was a memory of a sound, the happy, chattering, bubbling sound of a stream flowing right past its roots, a sound that had been its constant companion for 100 years. The feeling was so clear and so sad that a tear welled up in Ilara's own eye. She understood. The tree wasn't sick or dying from a disease. It was dying of a broken heart. Its best friend, the chattering stream, was gone. She didn't know how she knew, but she was certain. The stream had changed its path long ago, and the tree was left here alone with only a sad, muddy trickle to remember it by. It missed the conversation, the companionship, the life that the water had brought. "I hear you," Ilara whispered, her cheek now also pressed against the rough bark. "I'm so sorry your friend is gone." As she said the words, something remarkable happened. A gentle breeze swept through the willow's branches, making the long leaves rustle with a sound like a soft sigh. It wasn't a happy sound, but it felt acknowledged. The heavy sadness in the air seemed to lighten just a little. The firefly in her hand, which had been glowing so brightly, slowly returned to its calm, steady pulse. It had done its job. It had led her here, and she had listened. Alara stood with the tree for a few minutes longer, sharing its silence, keeping it company in its loneliness. She couldn't bring the stream back, not yet anyway, but she could let the tree know it wasn't forgotten, that its sadness had been heard. Finally, she pulled her hand away. "I have to go," she said softly, "but I won't forget you." She turned and walked back up the small slope, the feeling of the tree's loneliness lingering in her heart. It was a heavy feeling, but it was different from her own chaotic worries. This was a simple, clear sadness, and in a strange way, feeling someone else's pain so deeply had quieted her own. She looked down at the firefly lantern. Its light was shifting, now pulsing with a soft silvery blue color, and it felt cooler in her hands. It was pulling her gently in a new direction. The first part of her quest was complete. She had listened to the weeping willow, and as she walked on, guided by the changing light, she realized that for the first time all night she hadn't once thought about her own inability to sleep. Her mind was quiet, focused only on the next heart that needed to be heard. Leaving the willow tree felt like walking away from a friend in need. A part of Alara's heart remained there, sharing in its lonely silence, but the little firefly in her hands was insistent. Its light had shifted from a warm gold to a cool silvery blue, and it pulsed with a quicker, more nervous rhythm. It was like a tiny heartbeat fluttering with anxiety. This new feeling pulled her away from the damp lowlands and back onto a well-trodden animal path that wove through a thicket of brambles and young oak trees. The sense of deep, ancient sadness was gone, replaced by something else, a sharp, prickly feeling of fear. The firefly's light was now so cool it almost felt cold against her skin. The pulling sensation led her to a small, messy pile of dried leaves and broken twigs tucked between the exposed roots of a large, old oak tree. It was a den, but it looked uneasy, as if it had been made in a hurry. Alara stopped a few feet away and knelt down. She didn't want to scare whatever was inside. She cupped the firefly closer, its blue light spilling softly onto the ground in front of the den. That's when she heard it, a tiny, shivering whimper. It was such a small and frightened sound that it made her own heart ache. She peered into the darkness of the den entrance. Two wide, terrified eyes shone back at her from the shadows. It was a fox kid, incredibly young and small. Its fluffy red fur was puffed up, making it look like a frightened dandelion seed. It trembled all over, pressing itself as far back into the den as it could go. The moment Alara saw it, the firefly's light blazed with a bright, intense blue before settling back into its anxious pulse. This was the source of the fear. "Shh," Alara whispered, her voice as soft as the moonlight. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The fox kit let out another high-pitched whimper and shrank back further. Alara knew that reaching for it or moving suddenly would only make things worse. Bufo's words echoed in her mind. "Your only task is to listen." But how do you listen to a fear that has no words? She thought about what had comforted her when she was a little girl and afraid of the dark. It wasn't always words. Sometimes it was just a presence, a knowing that someone calm and bigger was nearby. Slowly, carefully, she sat down cross-legged on the earth, making sure she wasn't blocking the kit's escape. She was just a visitor sitting quietly. She placed the firefly lantern on the ground beside her, letting its cool blue light create a small, calm pool around them. She didn't speak. Instead, she just breathed. She took slow, deep breaths in and out, making her breathing as steady and rhythmic as a gentle wave on a shore. She poured all of her attention towards the little fox, not with a demanding stare, but with a soft, caring presence. For a long time, nothing changed. The kit continued to shiver, its eyes wide with a primal terror. Alara simply sat, breathing, listening to the night and to the tiny, frightened creature. Then, as she sat there, a feeling began to form in her heart, just as it had with the willow tree. But this wasn't a deep, slow sadness. This was a sharp, skittering panic. In her mind, she saw a vast, swooping shadow. She felt the heart-pounding terror of being small and alone, of a world filled with huge, unseen dangers. The owl's shadow wasn't just a thing. It was the embodiment of every fear the little kid had ever known. This wasn't a logical fear. It was the simple, overwhelming terror of the dark and the unknown. The kit wasn't just afraid. It was paralyzed by its own fear, unable to sleep, unable to feel safe even in its own home. A deep wave of understanding washed over Alara. She knew this feeling. It wasn't so different from her own restless nights when every small worry seemed to grow into a monstrous shadow in her mind. Her fears had names like deadlines and mistakes, but the feeling in her body, the tight chest, the racing heart, was exactly the same. Without thinking, she began to hum. It wasn't a song with words, just a simple, wordless melody her mother used to hum to her when she was sick or scared. It was a tune that held no meaning other than comfort. She hummed it softly, her voice low and steady, weaving it into the rhythm of her breathing. She watched the little fox. At first, there was no change. But then, after a few minutes, the tight puff of its fur seemed to relax just a little. The terrified trembling in its body softened into a slight shiver. Its wide, panicked eyes slowly began to droop, heavy with the exhaustion of being afraid for so long. Elara kept humming, pouring all the calm and safety she felt in Bufo's glade into that simple tune. She was telling the fox kit without words, "You are not alone. The shadow cannot hurt you here. You are safe." Slowly, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, the little fox uncurled itself. It took one hesitant step forward, then another until it was out of the deepest shadows of the den. It looked at Elara, its head tilted, listening. Then with a tiny, weary sigh, it walked right up to her, curled into a small, fluffy ball in the pool of silvery blue light from the firefly, laid its head on its paws and closed its eyes. Its breathing deepened, syncing with Elara's own calm breaths. The shivering stopped completely. The firefly on the ground beside them seemed to notice. Its light, which had been a cold, nervous blue, softened and warmed, shifting back to its original gentle golden green. Its pulse slowed to a lazy, contented rhythm. The job was done. Elara stopped humming, but she didn't move. She sat there watching the fox kit sleep, its little sides rising and falling in perfect peace. The prickly, fearful energy that had filled the space was gone, replaced by a profound quiet. She had done it again. She hadn't fought the owl. She hadn't even seen it. She had simply sat with the fear, acknowledged it, and offered a calm heart in return. And the fear, having been heard and understood, had simply melted away. Looking down at the peacefully sleeping kit and the now calm lantern, Elara felt a warmth spread through her own chest. It was a feeling of connection, of having helped. The tangled knot of her own worries felt a little looser, as if by soothing the fox she had soothed a part of herself. The firefly lifted gently from the ground and floated back into her waiting hand. It was warm again. It pulsed softly, not pulling in any direction, simply waiting. It was time to return to the glade and tell Bufo what she had heard. The walk back to the glade felt different from the journey out. The woods were no longer a place of unknown shadows, but a familiar neighborhood. Elara moved quietly, the sleeping firefly a comforting warmth in her cupped hand. Her mind was no longer a frantic beehive. It was a quiet pool, reflecting the two stories she now carried. The willow's deep, slow sorrow, and the fox kit's sharp, skittering fear. When she pushed aside the curtain of ivy and stepped back into the circle of glowing light, it was like coming home. The air was still warm and sweet, and the magical hum of the place seemed to welcome her back. Bufo was exactly where she had left him, sitting on his glowing lily pad in the center of the black mirror pond, but his amber eyes were brighter now and he seemed to sit a little taller. He watched her approach, not saying a word, simply waiting. Elara knelt at the water's edge, the soft grass cushioning her knees. She opened her hands, and the little firefly, sensing its home, gave one last soft pulse before floating gently from her palm and disappearing back into the secret fold in Bufo's skin. Well, Bufo's voice was a low, gentle rumble, like distant thunder that promises rain. "What did you hear, little one?" And so Elara told him. The words came easily, flowing out of her like the stream the willow missed so much. She described the immense weeping tree, its branches heavy with a grief she could feel in her own bones. It wasn't sick, she explained, her eyes seeing the memory instead of the pond. It was lonely. It missed its friend, the stream. It missed the sound of the water chatting all day and all night. It's been so long, and it feels like its best friend just moved away without saying goodbye. Bufo listened, his head tilted, his whole being focused on her words. He gave a slow, solemn nod. "The old willow," he said. "I have felt its sorrow seeping into the soil, but I did not know the reason. You have heard its heart's truth. And the other?" The lantern turned cold and blue. Elara's expression softened as she remembered the little fox. That was fear, she said. Not a big, dangerous fear, but a small one that felt huge. A little fox kit all alone, terrified of the owl's shadow. It was so scared it couldn't even sleep in its own den. She told him how she didn't try to explain away the fear or tell the kid it was silly. She just sat with it, breathing calmly until her own calm became a blanket it could curl up under. I just hummed my mother's old tune, she said, a little shyly. And it worked. It fell asleep right there. A deep, profound contentment settled on Bufo's broad face. You did not just listen with your ears, Ilara. You listened with your heart. That is the deepest magic. You gave the willow the gift of being understood, and you gave the fox kit the gift of safety. These are not small things. He shifted on his lily pad, looking thoughtfully across the pond. The willow's loneliness and the kit's fear. These are the threads of the gloom that has been dimming this glade. When one heart is heavy, it touches others. Your own restless thoughts were another such thread. But you have begun to weave them into something new. What do we do now? Ilara asked. The willow is still sad. Knowing why doesn't bring the stream back. Ah, said Bufo, his eyes twinkling. But knowing why is everything. Before, the sadness was a nameless fog. Now it has a name and a story. And a story can be mended. He gestured with a small webbed foot towards the pond. Look into the water, not at the surface but into its depth. Ilara leaned forward, peering into the dark, clear water. At first, she saw only the reflection of the stars and the glowing plants. But as she focused, as she let her eyes relax, she began to see something else. Faint, shimmering images like dreams drifted in the deep water. She saw a faint echo of the weeping willow, and a soft, fuzzy feeling that she knew was the sleeping fox kit. This pond is connected to all the water in these woods, Bufo explained. And water remembers. It remembers the old path of the stream. It remembers the joy of the willow. We cannot force the stream to return, but we can remind it of the way. We can encourage it. But how? Ilara asked, fascinated. We will use what you have learned, he said. We will use the memory of the sound. You heard the willow's memory of the stream's song, did you not? Ilara nodded. She could almost hear it now, a faint bubbling melody in her mind. Good, Bufo said. Magic, true magic, is often just a matter of reminding things of what they have forgotten. The stones in the stream's path have forgotten they can move. The water has forgotten its old happy song. We will remind them. He took a deep, slow breath, his chest swelling. I will provide the deep magic, the strength, he rumbled. It is the magic of the earth itself, of roots and stones. But you, Ilara, you must provide the memory. You must provide the map. You hold the sound of the stream in your heart, and you hold the image of the willow's need. You must guide the magic. Can you do that? Ilara felt a flutter of nervousness. I'll try. Then sit comfortably, Bufo instructed. Close your eyes. Picture the willow in your mind. See its sadness. Then remember the sound of the stream it showed you. Hear that bubbling, chattering, happy sound as clearly as you can. That is the song we are calling back. Ilara did as she was told. She crossed her legs, rested her hands on her knees, and closed her eyes. She pushed all her own thoughts away and filled her mind with the image of the great drooping willow. She felt its loneliness again, a hollow ache. And then she searched for the sound. At first it was faint, like a radio station from far away. But she focused, straining her memory. Slowly it grew clearer. The gentle gurgle over smooth stones, the soft splash against the bank, the light, cheerful melody of moving water. As she held the picture and the sound firmly in her mind, Bufo began to hum. It was not a gentle lullaby like hers. It was a deep, resonant, powerful hum that vibrated not through the air, but through the ground itself. Ilara could feel it in the bones of her hips, a low thrum of pure energy. The lily pad he sat on glowed brighter, and the light spread out in ripples across the black water of the pond. Now, Bufo's voice was both a thought and a sound in her head. Guide it. Send the memory from your heart, down into the earth towards the willow. Show the water the way home. Ilara poured all her concentration into the task. In her mind, she became a messenger. She took the memory of the stream's song and she sent it down through the soil, through the network of roots and stones. Like a lifeline thrown to a drowning friend, she imagined it as a shimmering, sound-filled thread of light, traveling underground from the glade, all the way to the stagnant, muddy patch under the willow, and then beyond, to where the stream was now, lost and muted. She didn't know how long she sat there. Time seemed to stretch and bend. She was just a bridge, a conductor for a memory, while Bufo's deep, earth-shaking hum provided the power. Finally, when she felt she could hold the image no longer, Bufo's humming slowly faded. The vibration in the ground softened and then stopped. The bright light of the lily pad dimmed back to its usual soft glow. Ilara opened her eyes, feeling strangely tired but also wonderfully clear, as if her mind had been washed clean. "It is done," Bufo said, his voice sounding a little weary but deeply satisfied. "We have sent the reminder. The rest is now up to the stream and the stones, but a memory as strong as the one you carried, it is a powerful thing. Now you must rest. Your part for tonight is over." And for the first time, the thought of rest didn't fill Ilara with resistance. It felt like the most natural, the most welcome thing in the world. A deep and peaceful silence settled over the glade after their work was done. Ilara felt a pleasant tiredness in her bones, the good kind that comes after a job well finished. It was different from the exhausting, wired feeling of her sleepless nights. This was a soft, heavy feeling, like a warm blanket inviting her to rest. Bufo seemed to sense this. "Sit, Ilara," he rumbled, his voice a soft, gravelly sound. "The magic has passed through you. You need to be still and let the earth settle. Watch the pond." Ilara didn't need to be told twice. She found a soft, mossy spot near the water's edge and sat down, drawing her knees to her chest. She looked into the dark, mirror-like surface of the pond. It was still again, but it seemed to hold the echo of the power that had just flowed through it. For a long while, they sat in a comfortable quiet, the only sounds being the gentle night breeze and the faint hum of the glowing plants. Ilara's mind, for once, was perfectly still. She wasn't thinking about the willow or the fox or the stream. She was just being. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten. After some time, she noticed a change in the pond. A faint silvery shimmer began to move deep within the water, like a slow-motion ripple. As she watched, an image started to form. It was hazy at first, like a dream forming behind her eyelids, but it grew clearer. She saw the weeping willow, but its branches were no longer hanging straight down like heavy curtains. They were swaying gently in a soft breeze, and there, at its base, was a thin, bright trickle of water sparkling in the moonlight. It wasn't the full, chattering stream yet, but it was more than the muddy seepage from before. The water was finding its way. A feeling not her own, but the trees washed over her. A feeling of profound relief, like a cool drink after a long thirst. The heavy weight of loneliness was lifting, replaced by a tentative, growing hope. The image in the pond shimmered and changed. Now she saw the fox kit's den. The little one was still curled in a ball, but it was no longer alone. A larger, beautiful red fox, its mother, had returned. The mother fox nuzzled her sleeping baby gently, then lay down beside it, wrapping her bushy tail around the kit in a protective, loving circle. The kit, in its deep sleep, wriggled closer, a tiny, contented sigh escaping its nose. The air around them was no longer prickly with fear, but soft with safety and love. Ilara felt a smile spread across her face, a real, genuine smile that started in her heart. She had helped do this. She had been a part of this healing. "The gloom is lifting," Bufo said softly, his amber eyes also watching the images in the water. "You see? One gentle act creates another." The willow's sadness made the forest's dreams heavy. The fox's fear added a chill. Now, with those weights being lifted, the air itself is becoming lighter. The magic of this place can breathe again. He turned his gaze to Ilara. "And what of you, little one? How does your own heart feel now?" Ilara thought about it. She looked inward, searching for the frantic sparrows, the buzzing worries, but she couldn't find them. Her mind felt spacious, quiet, like a cluttered room that had been carefully cleaned and aired out. "It's quiet," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "My mind is finally quiet. It's not empty, just peaceful. I don't feel like I'm fighting with my own thoughts anymore." "That is because you gave them a purpose," Bufo explained. "You turned your listening inward to understand the sadness of others, and in doing so, you understood your own. Your worries were like the fox's fear. They seemed huge and threatening in the dark. But when you brought the gentle light of your attention to them, just as you did for the kit, they lost their power. You saw them for what they were, just thoughts, not monsters. It made perfect sense. Sitting there in the glowing glade, it all seemed so simple." "I think I understand now," Ilara whispered. "I was so busy trying to fight my thoughts, to push them away. that I was just making them stronger. All they ever really wanted was to be heard. Bufo gave a slow, approving blink. You have learned the lesson of the Sorcerer Toad. It is not about great explosions of power. It is about the gentle magic of attention. It is about sitting with what is without judgment and allowing it to be, until it transforms on its own. He shifted on his lily pad, which pulsed with a soft, steady light. The stream will find its way back fully in its own time. The fox will grow brave. The willow will remember how to laugh in the wind. And you, Alara, you will sleep. As he said the word sleep, a massive, uncontrollable yawn overtook Alara. It was a deep, full-bodied yawn that seemed to come from the soles of her feet. The pleasant tiredness she had felt earlier now washed over her in a warm, irresistible wave. Her eyelids felt as heavy as stones. She tried to fight it for a second out of habit, but then she let go. There was no need to fight anymore. The glade was safe. Bufo was here. She was safe, I think. I think I am, she mumbled, her words slurring with sleepiness. Then let your journey end as it began, Bufo said, his voice becoming even softer, like a lullaby itself. Here in the quiet. Rest your head on the moss, Alara. It is softer than any pillow. Close your eyes. I will keep watch. Alara didn't have the energy to argue. She slowly lay down, her head nestling into the incredibly soft, cool moss. It cradled her head perfectly. She looked up one last time at the magical glade, the glowing flowers, the starry sky, the kind, ancient face of the Sorcerer Toad on his golden lily pad. Bufo began to croak. But it wasn't a loud, jarring sound. It was a deep, rhythmic, melodic vibration. It was the sound of the earth resting. It was the heartbeat of the night itself. As Alara listened to the gentle, pulsing croak, her breathing began to slow, matching its rhythm. In and out, in and out. The light of the glade blurred and softened behind her heavy eyelids. The last thing she was aware of was a feeling of perfect peace, a sense that all was well and the comforting knowledge that she was not alone. The sparrows in her mind had finally settled in their nests, and silence, beautiful, welcoming silence, had taken their place. And into that silence, Alara, for the first time in a very long time, slipped effortlessly into a deep and dreamless sleep. Ilara's sleep was not just an absence of wakefulness. It was a deep, dark, and healing ocean. There were no dreams, no fragments of worry, no echoes of the day. There was only a profound and perfect silence within her. It was the kind of sleep her body and soul had been desperately craving for months, maybe even years. She didn't know how long she lay there on the soft moss, wrapped in the gentle hum of the glade and the rhythmic, grounding croak of the Sorcerer Toad. It could have been minutes or hours. In that kind of rest, time lost all meaning. She was awakened not by a sound but by a feeling of something being different. The first thing she noticed was the light. It was no longer the silver blue of moonlight but the soft, gentle gold of early dawn. The sky above the glade was painted in shades of pale lavender and rose, and the first birds of the morning were beginning their cheerful, tentative songs. She sat up slowly, stretching her arms. Her body felt loose and relaxed. Her mind felt clear, like a window washed clean by a night's rain. There was no grogginess, no desire to go back to sleep. She felt truly, completely rested. She looked towards the pond. Bufo was still there on his lily pad watching her. His amber eyes seemed to hold the warmth of the new day. "Good morning, Alara," he rumbled, his voice even softer than usual, as if not to disturb the peace of the dawn. "Good morning," she replied, her own voice clear and steady. She took a deep breath of the cool, fresh morning air. "I slept?" "You did," Bufo said. "And the world continued on beautifully without your worries to carry it." It was a strange thing to say, but Alara understood. She had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, and for one night, she had put it down, and the world had been just fine. "What happens now?" she asked, looking around the glade. In the daylight, it was still beautiful, but the magical glow of the flowers and mushrooms had faded, looking more like ordinary, though very lovely plants. It was as if the magic retreated with the sun, resting itself for the next night. "Now," said Bufo, "you return to your world. You have your day to live. The quest is complete." A small, unexpected pang of sadness touched Alara's heart. Will I be able to come back? Will I see you again?" Bufo regarded her kindly. The glade is always here for those who know how to look for it. But you may not find me on my lily pad. My work here for now is done. The gloom has lifted. The dreams are sweet again. And you, he paused, you have learned the secret. You do not need a magical toad to find peace anymore. You carry the knowledge inside you. Ilara understood. This wasn't a place for her to escape to every night. It was a lesson, a single perfect night of learning that she could take back with her. Will my sleep be like this always now? She asked, a little nervously. She couldn't bear the thought of returning to her restless nights. Bufo gave a slow, wise blink. There will be nights when the sparrows in your mind will stir again. That is only human. But now you know how to calm them. You know to listen, not to fight. You know that a gentle hum can be stronger than a shouted command. Remember the fox kit. Remember the willow. Apply the same gentle magic to your own heart. He shifted, and the lily pad beneath him drifted slightly closer to the shore where she sat. Before you go, look into the pond one last time. See the result of your gentle work. Ilara leaned forward. The pond in the dawn light was no longer a black mirror. It was clear and fresh, and she could see straight to the sandy bottom. And there, shimmering on the surface, were images more vivid than the ones from the night before. She saw the weeping willow, its long branches swaying happily in the morning breeze. A strong, steady stream now flowed merrily around its roots, chuckling and bubbling as it went. The tree seemed to stand taller, its leaves a brighter, healthier green. It was no longer a weeping willow, but simply a joyful one. Then the image changed. She saw the fox kit, tumbling and play-fighting with a sibling in the morning sun outside the den. Its mother watched nearby, a relaxed look on her sharp face. There was no trace of the paralyzing fear that had gripped it just hours before. It was just a young animal, happy and safe. Tears welled in Ilara's eyes, but they were tears of pure joy. She had been a part of this. Her simple act of listening had helped to heal these little corners of the world. The magic you did last night was real, Bufo said. It was not a dream. You made a difference. He leaned forward slightly. And so you must make a difference in your own world too. Carry this quiet with you. When you feel rushed, remember the pace of the night. When you feel worried, remember to breathe and listen. This is your true purpose now. Ilara nodded, wiping her tears. She felt strong, not in a powerful way, but in a steady, resilient way. She knew life would still have its challenges, but she felt equipped to meet them. It is time for you to go, Bufo said gently. The path home is clear in the morning light. Ilara stood up. Her body felt light and energetic. She looked at the sorcerer toad, this strange, wonderful, kind creature who had given her the greatest gift she could imagine. Thank you, Bufo, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for everything. You are most welcome, Ilara, he replied, his gravelly voice warm. Remember the quiet, now go. Your day awaits. With one last long look at the magical glade, at the pond, and at the wise toad on his lily pad, Ilara turned and walked towards the curtain of ivy. She pushed it aside and stepped back onto the path. The morning woods were alive with light and sound. It was the same path she had walked down last night, but everything felt different because she was different. She didn't rush. She walked slowly, feeling the solid earth beneath her feet, listening to the real bird song, noticing the way the sun dappled through the leaves. Her mind was quiet, present, and perfectly at peace. She had gone into the woods looking for sleep. She was coming out of them, having found herself. The walk home felt like a new beginning. Ilara moved through the familiar woods, but it was as if she was seeing them for the very first time. The colors seemed brighter. The green of the moss was more vibrant, the brown of the tree trunks richer and deeper. She heard individual bird songs instead of a chaotic noise, the cheerful chirp of a sparrow, the rhythmic knocking of a woodpecker, the coo of a dove. Her mind, which for so long had been a crowded, noisy room, was now a quiet, spacious hall. A thought would come, and instead of latching onto it and spinning it into a worry, she would simply notice it. I have that meeting today. She would acknowledge the thought, feel the slight tension it brought, and then, just like she had with the fox kit's fear, she would breathe and let it pass through her. It was astonishingly simple. When she reached the edge of the woods and saw her house, it didn't feel like a cage of responsibilities waiting for her. It just felt like her house. It looked peaceful in the morning sun. She slipped inside as quietly as she had left. The world inside was still asleep. She could hear the soft, regular breathing of her family from the other rooms. A deep sense of tenderness washed over her. They were all in their own worlds, dreaming their dreams, completely unaware of her magical night. And that was perfectly okay. She moved through her morning routine not with rushed urgency, but with a calm, deliberate pace. She made a cup of tea and stood by the kitchen window, watching the sun climb higher. She didn't pick up her phone. She didn't mentally run through her to-do list. She just watched the light change in the garden and she sipped her tea, tasting it properly. When her family began to wake up, the usual morning chaos started. Her younger brother was grumpy and couldn't find his homework. Her mother was rushing, worried about being late for work. The noise and the demands started to swirl around the kitchen. The old Alara would have felt her shoulders tense up, her breath become shallow. She would have snapped at her brother or felt a wave of anxiety about her own day crashing over her. But the new Alara, the one who had sat with a weeping willow and a frightened fox, did something different. She watched the frantic energy in the room as if it were a weather pattern. She saw her brother's panic not as an attack on her peace, but as his own little sparrow heart fluttering. She walked over to him. Instead of saying, "It's not my problem," or "You should have done it last night," she simply put a hand on his shoulder. "Take a breath," she said, her voice calm. "Let's retrace your steps from last night. I'll help you look." He looked up at her, surprised. Her calmness was contagious. His frantic searching slowed. He took a breath. And together, they found the homework tucked inside a library book on the living room sofa. Her mother, watching this, also seemed to slow down. "You're very quiet this morning, Alara," she remarked, but she said it with a smile. "You seem rested." "I am," Alara said, and she meant it in every possible way. The true test came later, at work. Her job in a small, busy office was often a source of her biggest anxieties. The constant ping of emails, the pressure of deadlines, the feeling of never being quite caught up, it was a perfect breeding ground for her restless mind. She sat down at her desk. The computer screen glowed, filled with unread messages. For a moment, the old feeling rose in her chest. A tight, panicky feeling. The sparrows were stirring. But then she remembered Bufo's glade. She pictured the still black pond. She imagined her worries not as monsters, but like the leaves of the willow just hanging there. She didn't need to fight them. She just needed to acknowledge them. She closed her eyes for just a moment right there at her desk. She took one slow, deep breath. Imagining she was breathing in the calm, floral scent of the glade. She held it and then let it out in a long, soft sigh. When she opened her eyes, the screen was the same. The emails were still there. But she was different. The panicky feeling had receded. It hadn't won. She started with one email, just one. She gave it her full attention, not thinking about the 50 others waiting. She finished it and then moved to the next. It was like following the firefly's light, one step at a time, not worrying about the whole journey. During her lunch break, instead of eating at her desk while working, she went outside and sat on a bench in a small patch of sun. She ate her sandwich and watched the people in the cars go by. She wasn't trying to be productive. She was just being. And it felt wonderful. Later in the afternoon, a colleague came to her stressed about a shared project. The old Alara would have absorbed that stress, adding it to her own pile. But the new Alara simply listened. She didn't interrupt with solutions or her own worries. She just listened, nodding, until her colleague had said everything she needed to say. "Thanks for listening," her colleague said, looking visibly relieved. "I feel better now." Alara just smiled. She had done it again. The same magic worked here in the fluorescent light of an office as it did in a moonlit forest. Listening was the magic. As the day drew to a close, she realized something incredible. It had been a good day. Not a perfect problem-free day, but a good one. She had faced the same challenges she always did, but she had faced them with a new tool, a quiet heart. Walking home, she felt the gentle tiredness of a day fully lived, not the frantic exhaustion of a day barely survived. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, a beautiful echo of the dawn that had welcomed her back from the glade. She knew that night would come again. She would get into bed and turn out the light. The old fear of sleeplessness tried to whisper to her, a faint, familiar ghost. But Alara wasn't afraid. She knew what to do. She would breathe. She would listen to the quiet sounds of her own house. She would picture the sorcerer toad on his lily pad, and she would remember that deep rhythmic croak, the heartbeat of the earth itself. She had brought the glade home with her. It wasn't a place on a map. It was a place inside her, and it was always open, always peaceful, and always waiting for her to return. The evening unfolded with a quiet rhythm that felt both new and deeply familiar. Ilara helped her mother prepare dinner, her movements slow and deliberate. She chopped vegetables, noticing the vibrant green of the bell pepper and the deep red of the tomato. She listened to the sizzle of onions in the pan, not as a noise to be endured, but as a warm, comforting sound of a home being cared for. Her family noticed the change in her. There was no dramatic announcement, but a subtle shift in her energy. Her younger brother, who usually tiptoed around her when she was stressed, felt safe enough to tell her a long, rambling story about his video game. Ilara listened, really listened, without looking at her phone or thinking about what she needed to do next. She just smiled and nodded, and he beamed under the attention. After dinner, instead of disappearing into her room to worry about the next day, she sat in the living room with her family. They didn't do anything special. Her father read the newspaper. Her mother knitted. Her brother played on a tablet. But the silence in the room was comfortable, not heavy. It was the silence of people content to simply be together. When it was finally time for bed, a small, familiar flutter of anxiety touched Ilara's heart. It was the ghost of all those hundreds of sleepless nights, a conditioned fear of the dark and the quiet. She stood in her bedroom doorway, looking at her bed. It had been a place of frustration for so long, but then she took a breath, just one, deep and slow. She remembered Buffo's words. The magic was not in moving the stream. It was in the listening. She wasn't going to fight for sleep tonight. She was just going to prepare for it, gently, like preparing a soft place for a dear friend to rest. She changed into her pajamas and didn't immediately turn out the light. Instead, she sat on the edge of her bed and did what she had done in the glade. She closed her eyes and listened. At first, she heard the obvious things. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the faint sound of a television from a neighbor's house, the rustle of her own clothes as she shifted, but she kept listening, going deeper. She heard the soft sigh of her own breathing. She felt the steady, reliable beat of her own heart. And beneath it all, she imagined she could hear the deep, quiet hum of the world itself, the same hum that pulsed through Buffo's glade. It was always there, this background piece. She just had to tune into it. She thought about the willow tree. She pictured it now, strong and happy, with the stream chattering happily at its feet. She pictured the little fox kit, sleeping safely under its mother's watchful eye. She had helped them find their peace, and in doing so, she had found a map to her own. She finally reached over and turned off the lamp. The room was plunged into darkness. The old panic tried to rise. What if I can't sleep? What about tomorrow? I have so much to do. Instead of wrestling with the thoughts, she did something different. She imagined them as leaves on the weeping willow. She saw each worry as a single leaf attached to a branch. She didn't try to tear the leaves off. She just acknowledged they were there, and then she let her attention drift back to the sound of her own breathing. In and out like a gentle wave. She remembered the feeling of the cool moss beneath her head. She remembered the sight of the starry sky through the canopy of the magical glade. She remembered the deep, rhythmic, calming croak of the sorcerer toad. And then she started to hum. It was the same wordless tune she had hummed to the fox kit. It was soft, barely audible, just for her. She hummed it into the darkness of her room, weaving a blanket of sound and memory around herself. She wasn't demanding that sleep come. She was creating a space where sleep would want to come. A safe, quiet, gentle space. She didn't know when it happened. There was no clear moment of crossing over. The hum faded into silence. The image of the glade softened and blurred. The feeling of the bedsheets, the sound of her breath, the distant hum of the world, all of it slowly melted together into a warm, welcoming fog. And then she was asleep. It wasn't the dead, dreamless crash of the night before in the glade. This was a normal, gentle, natural sleep. She dreamed, but the dreams were soft and fleeting, like clouds passing in a calm sky. She dreamed of walking through a forest where the trees whispered kindly secrets. She dreamed of sitting by a quiet pond. When the first light of dawn touched her window, her eyes fluttered open. She had woken up naturally before her alarm. She lay there for a moment, feeling the quality of her wakefulness. There was no grogginess, no heavy feeling of dread. Her body felt rested. Her mind was clear and quiet. She had slept. Not a magical forced sleep, but a real, honest, deep sleep that her own body had created. A slow, wide smile spread across her face. She had done it. Alone in her own room without any magic other than the magic she carried inside her. She got out of bed and went to the window. The world outside was washed in the soft, hopeful colors of a new day. A bird was sitting on a fence post, singing its heart out. It reminded her of the sparrows Bufo had spoken of. But this sparrow wasn't startled or frantic. It was just singing its song, happy to be alive. Ilara felt the same. The sparrows in her mind were quiet, not out of exhaustion, but out of contentment. They were at rest. She knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that this was not a one-time thing. She had learned a skill like riding a bike. She might wobble sometimes. She might have a night where it was harder to find the quiet, but she would never completely forget how it felt. She now knew the path to the quiet glade, because the glade was no longer just a place in the woods. It was a place inside her. And she could visit it any time she wanted, just by listening, just by breathing, just by being gently present in her own life. She had gone looking for a single night of sleep. She had found a lifetime of peace. Weeks turned into months, and the memory of that one magical night did not fade for Ilara. Instead, it became a part of her, like a favorite story she had read so many times she knew it by heart. It was her secret source of strength. Life, of course, continued to have its ups and downs. There were still stressful days at work. There were still arguments with her brother and worries about the future. She was human, after all. The sparrows in her mind did not disappear forever, but now she knew how to calm them. On a particularly difficult afternoon, when a big project was going wrong and her manager was unhappy, she felt the old familiar panic start to rise. Her chest tightened, and her thoughts began to race in frantic circles. Instead of fighting it, she excused herself and went to the quiet room they had at her office. She sat on a comfortable chair, closed her eyes, and for just 1 minute she was back in the glade. She felt the soft moss, saw the glowing lily pad, and heard the deep, rumbling voice of her friend. Your only task is to listen. She listened to her own panic, acknowledged it without judgment, and breathed until it settled. When she walked back to her desk, she was calm and clear-headed, ready to tackle the problem one step at a time. The true test came one night, months after her adventure. She had a terrible cold. Her nose was stuffed, her throat was sore, and every bone in her body ached. She went to bed feeling miserable, and as she lay in the dark, the discomfort made it impossible to sleep. The old frustrated feeling of sleeplessness began to creep back in. It was the perfect condition for a return to her old patterns. I'll never get to sleep like this. I'll be exhausted tomorrow. This is just like before. The thoughts were there, but this time they didn't have the same power over her. She smiled a little in the dark. It was as if Bufo was there, giving her a wise, knowing look. She didn't try to force the sleep to come. She simply accepted that her body was uncomfortable. She propped her pillows up, got a drink of water, and decided that if she was awake, she would just be awake peacefully. She started to hum her mother's tune, the one that had soothed the fox kit. She wasn't humming for sleep. She was humming for comfort. She was listening to her own body's needs with kindness, not frustration. She didn't sleep well that night, but she rested. And there was a world of difference between the two. She didn't spend the night fighting and fretting. She spent it caring for herself, and in the morning, though she was still sick, her spirit was not weary. One weekend, she felt a gentle pull to go for a walk. She didn't plan it, but her feet naturally carried her back towards the whispering pines. It was a bright, sunny afternoon. Squirrels chased each other up trees and birds flitted through the branches. She found the path and then the curtain of ivy. Her heart beat a little faster with anticipation. Would it still be there? Would he be there? She pushed the ivy aside and stepped through. The glade was beautiful in the daylight. Sunbeams streamed down, lighting up the green grass and the colorful wildflowers. The pond sparkled clear and blue. It was a perfectly lovely, peaceful little clearing. The mushrooms were just ordinary mushrooms. The flowers no longer glowed with an internal light. It felt normal. And the lily pad in the center of the pond was empty. A small, expected sigh escaped Ilara's lips. She wasn't disappointed, not really. It was like visiting your old elementary school. The magic was in the memory, not the physical place. She walked to the edge of the pond and sat down in her old spot. She closed her eyes, just feeling the sun on her face and listening to the sounds of the forest, and then she heard it, faint but unmistakable, the happy, constant chattering sound of a stream. It wasn't in the glade, but she knew it was close by. She stood up and followed the sound, walking around the edge of the glade and into the trees behind it. There it was, a beautiful, clear stream tumbled over smooth gray stones. It was full of life and energy. She followed it for a little way, and her breath caught in her throat. The stream flowed right past the base of the great willow tree. But the tree was transformed. Its branches no longer drooped heavily to the ground. They swayed gracefully in the breeze, their long leaves dancing and skimming the surface of the happy water. The tree seemed to stand taller, its trunk strong and proud. It was, without a doubt, a happy tree. Ilara placed her hand on its bark. She didn't feel a wave of loneliness, but a warm, contented hum of life. "I'm glad you're doing well," she whispered. A flash of movement caught her eye. Deeper in the woods, a young fox, now much bigger and lankier, was practicing its pouncing technique on a fallen leaf. It was bold and playful. Seeing her, it didn't freeze in fear. It simply stopped, looked at her with curious, intelligent eyes for a moment, and then trotted off into the undergrowth, confident and unafraid. Everything was as it should be. She walked back to the empty glade one last time, a deep feeling of gratitude filling her heart. She didn't need to see Bufo to know he was out there somewhere, perhaps on another lily pad in another hidden glade, helping another restless heart. He had given her the greatest gift, not a single night of sleep, but the tools to find 1,000 more. He had taught her that peace wasn't a destination you arrive at, but a manner of traveling. It was in the gentle listening, the kind breathing, the acceptance of what is. That night, as she got ready for bed, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. She saw the same person, but she felt different inside. The journey had changed her. She was no longer a victim of her own restless mind. She was its gentle keeper. She climbed into bed, turned out the light, and lay in the comforting darkness. She thought of the willow dancing with the stream. She thought of the fox, brave and free. She thought of the sorcerer toad, a quiet guardian in a hidden corner of the world. She took a slow, deep breath and then let it out. And as the moon rose over the quiet houses, Ilara closed her eyes, and without any effort at all, she slipped away into a deep, gentle, and dream-filled sleep. She had found her way home, not just to her bed, but to herself. And she knew with absolute certainty that she would always be able to find her way back.